in the freezing waters of the Antarctic Ocean, 28 people were sailing on a ship. But their mighty vessel had become trapped, locked tight among millions of tons of crushing ice. 7 long months had already passed, and they were stuck in the exact same place. Then, one dark night, a terrifying sound rumbled from beneath the ship. Suddenly, the whole vessel tilted to one side, as if some enormous creature was pushing it upward from below with monstrous force. What happened next was something they could never have imagined in their wildest dreams. Welcome once again, dear viewers. Imagine the Antarctic ocean waves as tall as buildings, winds that roar at 100 kilometers per hour, and water so icy cold that a human's blood could freeze solid in minutes. To journey across these waters is like shaking hands with death itself. Even if you survive the bitter winds and towering waves, the colossal blocks of ice as massive as a mountain hold the power to crush a ship into splinters. Yet, 111 years ago, when ships were weaker and technology far less advanced, 28 men sailed straight into this nightmare. And here's the shocking part. They survived, not just weeks, not even months, but an unbelievable 2 full years, beneath the open sky, stranded in the land of endless ice. Around them stretched nothing but frozen wastelands, stormy winds, no food, no water, and no chance to call for help. This was the survival story that the world would later call the greatest survival story of all time. At the center of this epic stood Sir Ernest Shackleton, a fearless explorer with a mission unlike any other, to test the absolute limits of human endurance. That's exactly why he named his ship Endurance. Shackleton had already faced terrifying expeditions before. In 1901, he joined a mission that pushed deep into Antarctica. But he was forced to turn back. Still 750 kilometers away from the pole, in 1907, he tried again. Coming even closer, just 150 kilometers away, for retreating once more. Now, in 1914, his dream wasn't only to reach Antarctica. This time, he planned to walk right across the entire continent, on foot. Why? Because Sir Ernest Shackleton wanted to achieve what no human being had ever done before. This daring quest was named the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition. And because it was so dangerous, hardly anyone wanted to join. Shackleton's first challenge was finding a crew. For that, he placed a now legendary advertisement in the Times newspaper. But this was no cheerful travel poster. Oh no, it began with the bold words, "Men wanted for hazardous journey." The ad warned clearly, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. Shackleton wasn't looking for the faint-hearted. He wanted men who craved challenge and weren't afraid of death itself. And soon, 27 brave souls answered the call. Shackleton had been planning this expedition for 4 long years. But, as the date approached, his dream was nearly destroyed. Why? Because the First World War had just begun. Many believed the expedition would be cancelled. But Britain, already at war, still permitted Shackleton to proceed. Now, all he needed was a ship strong enough to punch through the deadly ice of the Antarctic seas. Such ships weren't easy to find. But luckily, one had already been built in Norway. Originally designed for an Arctic explorer who dreamed of taking wealthy hunters on polar bear expeditions. The project had failed. Shackleton bought this ship and named it Endurance. Built from thick American oak, its design allowed it to withstand crushing ice. It was a hybrid vessel, equipped with both sails and a powerful engine. Finally, the day arrived, the moment Shackleton had been waiting for. On August 8, 1914, Endurance set sail from Plymouth, England. For 4 months, it crossed the Atlantic Ocean, stopping first in Argentina and then at South Georgia Island. After final preparations, on December 5, 1914, Shackleton pointed his ship southward, toward the Weddell Sea of Antarctica. On board were 28 men and 50 strong sled dogs, trained to haul supplies across the endless ice. For 46 days, they sailed steadily, drawing closer to their target. At last, they were just one day away from reaching the Antarctic coast. But on January 18, 1915, disaster struck. The Weddell Sea froze around them. Ice grew thicker and thicker until it reached a crushing depth of 18 feet. Endurance could go no further. Worse, the ice was so unstable that beginning a journey on foot was impossible. Shackleton's grand expedition was halted, stranded just 130 kilometers short of its starting point. The ship was already trapped in the ice. At first, the crew thought this was just a temporary problem, nothing too serious. But in truth, this became the greatest obstacle standing in the way of the Imperial Transantarctic expedition. For days, they tried everything. Finally, they decided to move their 300-ton ship forward manually by cutting through the ice with picks and shovels. For 2 endless days, the crew hacked at the frozen sheets, sweating, shivering, and exhausting every ounce of strength they had. But the task was far harder than they had imagined. After weeks of back-breaking effort, they had only managed to push Endurance forward by a mere 300 meters. Soon, the ship was trapped again. After a month of struggle, Sir Ernest Shackleton finally surrendered to the ice. On February 14, 1915, he made a tough decision. They would stop fighting and let nature decide. Perhaps, when winter ended, the ice would crack and set them free. In the meantime, Endurance became their floating winter station. Life on board settled into a strange rhythm. Shackleton kept discipline alive, and the men kept busy. They played soccer on the ice, cut each other's hair, debated for hours, and even cooked together anything to distract themselves while waiting for the ice to open a path. Slowly, the crew grew closer, forming bonds like family. Even with their sled dogs, deep emotional connections began to form. Everyone hoped that one day the frozen ocean would carry them back toward civilization, but nature had other plans. In April 1915, the ice did begin to crack, but not in the way they prayed. Gigantic pressure from millions of tons of ice caused the floes to smash and grind against each other, piling up like walls of steel. That crushing force began pressing hard against Endurance. The crew worked desperately, carving away ice to relieve the strain. For a while, their efforts saved the ship, but the danger never really left them. On July 14, 1915, disaster struck again. In the dead of night, a thunderous sound roared beneath the ship, and Endurance lurched violently to one side. Nobody knew what had happened. Was it an enormous whale, or the wrath of the ice itself? When daylight came, the truth shocked them. The relentless ice had bent the ship sideways and snapped its rudder clean in half. Now, they were trapped for 7 months, more than 2,000 kilometers from the nearest human settlement. No communication. No hope of rescue. Their only hope was the steady leadership of Shackleton. By October 18, 1915, the dream of the Imperial Transantarctic expedition was in ruins. For 9 long months, the men had been stuck in the same place. That night, another wave of crushing pressure struck, tilting Endurance 30 degrees in seconds. The hull groaned and cracked. Water began to seep inside through the shattered wood. All hands worked furiously, pumping water, patching holes, and bailing buckets through the night. But deep down, they knew the ship's time was ending. On October 27, 1915, Shackleton gave the heartbreaking order to abandon ship. The men carried out food, supplies, sled dogs, lifeboats, and even their bedding. Setting up camp on the open ice beneath the endless Antarctic sky, Soon after, their faithful ship Endurance, the vessel that had sheltered them for so long, was crushed by the ice and sank slowly into the freezing depths. Doubt. Now the men faced the most frightening question of all. How long could they survive, stranded on drifting ice? Shackleton knew staying put was certain death. He had heard of Pollet Island, 550 kilometers away, where an old supply station might still exist. But reaching it with just 3 small lifeboats seemed impossible. The very ice that destroyed a massive ship could easily smash flimsy boats into splinters. So, Shackleton decided they would march on foot toward Pollet Island, and so began the deadliest part of their adventure. For 6 more months, the crew struggled across shifting ice floes. Each time they set up camp, the ice either cracked open or drifted away with the ocean currents. By a stroke of luck, the floes carried them slowly toward Pollet Island. Shackleton decided to trust the drifting ice itself, but supplies were running out. To survive, the men hunted whatever they could find. Penguins and seals became their only meals. By February 1916, 13 months into the ordeal, they were down to just 1 biscuit per man each day. Hunger grew unbearable. Finally, with heavy hearts, they killed their beloved dogs for food. It gave them a few more days of life, but their hope now rested entirely on reaching land. Yet fate twisted again. Instead of Pollet Island, the drifting ice carried them toward a place called Elephant Island. Storms lashed the seas. Temperatures plummeted to -20 degrees. Frostbite blackened their skin. Their lips and tongues swelled so badly, eating or speaking became torture. By April 1916, after endless suffering, they finally reached solid land, Elephant Island. For the first time in 16 months, they set foot on real Earth. The relief was overwhelming, but Elephant Island was barren, icy, and utterly lifeless. No food, no help. No chance of survival. Their only hope lay far away South Georgia Island, 1,300 kilometers across one of the most dangerous seas in the world. Shackleton made the boldest decision yet. He would take 1 lifeboat and sail there himself. Choosing 5 brave crew members, he set out on April 24, 1916. What followed was one of the most dangerous voyages ever attempted. Towering waves rose 90 feet high, tossing their tiny boat like a toy. The cold was so savage that their bodies froze stiff, and with no GPS, no modern compass, they navigated only by the stars and the brief glimpses of the sun. Each day they fought with all their might, barely covering 80 kilometers. After 16 brutal days, on May 10, 1916, Shackleton and his men staggered onto South Georgia Island. But fate had one more challenge. They had landed on the wrong side. Before them loomed mountains 4,000 feet high. With no equipment and no rest, they climbed for 36 hours non-stop, finally stumbling down the other side into a whaling station. Shackleton was so transformed by hunger and exhaustion that nobody even recognized him at first. Nobody believed he was the same explorer who had vanished nearly 2 years earlier. After 3 days of rest, Shackleton immediately set out again to rescue the 22 men he had left behind. Several failed attempts followed. But at last, on August 30, 1916, Shackleton spotted smoke rising from Elephant Island, the signal fire of his desperate men. He feared the worst, unsure how many had survived. But when he reached shore, he discovered a miracle. Every single one of the 22 men was alive. Shackleton had not completed his dream of crossing Antarctica. He had failed twice before to reach the South Pole, and once again, his great expedition had collapsed just 120 kilometers short of its starting point. But by saving every last member of his crew, Shackleton achieved something far greater. His story became legendary, the greatest survival tale ever told. Over a century later, in 2022, explorers finally discovered Endurance resting on the Antarctic seabed, 3,000 meters below the surface. Perfectly preserved by the icy waters, the ship's name could still be read clearly on her bow. And so, Shackleton's Endurance continues to live on, not as a ship of failure, but as a symbol of courage, hope, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit.